So today I'm going to introduce our speaker, Laurie Barkman. Laurie Barkman is the CEO of SmallDotBig, consulting with entrepreneurs, small businesses, and nonprofits to develop strategies for innovation, transition, and growth. Laurie hosts the Succession Stories podcast featuring interviews with CEOs and next generation entrepreneurs. She is the former CEO of Genco Marketplace, acquired by FedEx, and was the CEO and managing partner at Topanga Partners, a private equity firm focused on early stage technologies. Laurie has more than 20 years of digital transformation, entrepreneurship, and intrapreneurship in tech, retail, logistics, and service industries, from startups to corporates. She is an advisory board member of Safety.io, a corporate startup subsidiary of MSA Safety, and is an instructor at CMU for the Corporate Startup Lab capstone course. Laurie earned a BS from Cornell University in 1993 and an MBA from Tepper in 1999. Fun fact about Laurie is while at Tepper, she was the president of the Entrepreneurship Club. She has stayed actively involved as an alum and served on the Tepper Alumni Board as past president. So I'm going to hand it over to Laurie. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for tuning in today. I'm excited to share a little bit about my experience and also largely share some thoughts as you approach your entrepreneurial path. And ultimately today, the idea behind today was kind of influenced by an article by Steve Blank. He wrote this, I think in 2010, and it was the 4 types of entrepreneurship. So you're seeing today, you're getting more than you bargained for. We're going to talk about 8 types of entrepreneurship. And in Allison's introduction, you may have gotten the sense of, oh, wow, Laurie's on her own. She's doing her own thing. She's an entrepreneur. Yes, good observation. With SmallDotBig, I am an entrepreneur, and it's something I've been thinking about a long time. As she mentioned, you know, even with the Entrepreneurship Club back many moons ago at Tepper, it's something I've always been passionate about. And my mission in my consulting practice is guiding entrepreneurs so their ideas can take flight. And I work with small to medium-sized businesses. And on my show, Succession Stories, I talk with CEOs of privately held companies, family businesses that have entrepreneurial roots. And these are multiple generations later. And it's really fascinating. So I'll try to weave in some of my own experiences into today, but also try to give you a sense of what entrepreneurial paths might be out there in terms of what's really the best fit for you is what it comes down to. And I know many of you out there may be contemplating entrepreneurship, hence you're attending today. And so I thought it would be interesting to talk about these different kinds of entrepreneurship so that you can choose a path that fits your goals. I love this quote from Maya Angelou: success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. And as an entrepreneur, it's a lot of hard work, and the payoff can be there, but if you're not enjoying it along the way, you got to ask yourself, is that the right thing for you? So let's start with some numbers. There are a lot of entrepreneurs around the world, 600 million of them, and some of them make it and some of them don't. In the United States, the number is about 20%. 20% of businesses fail during their first 2 years. Now, of course, there's a lot of reasons why that might be, but the point is that it is not an easy path. So again, I think picking the path that's right for you so that the journey is directionally where you want to go. So the 8 different kinds of entrepreneurship that I want to talk about are listed here. And for each, we'll spend some time talking about some characteristics of the entrepreneur, some things to think about in terms of potential risk and reward. And ultimately, what I would ask for you as you think about this content today is, can you see yourself in one or more of these categories? So let's start with small business entrepreneurship. This is certainly a very, very big bucket. And this is where I find myself today. And large companies started out small, and many companies start out small. This is just the nature of it. But as a category, I thought it would be important to talk about it. 90% of US entities are small to medium-sized businesses. They are the backbone of employment in our country. And just some again, some data here for you. There are about 30 million businesses, small businesses in the United States, and about 64% of all new jobs created are in small businesses. And small business has about under 500 employees. Typically, I don't see a revenue number characterizing small businesses. It's more of an employee number, but sometimes you will see a range of revenue also. A lot of job creation and a lot of employment. So what might be motivating and what might be an incentive for someone to be a small business entrepreneur? Well, a very common answer is being their own boss. I like that too, being someone who's worked in corporate and worked for other people my entire career. It is quite nice, I will say, to be my own boss and setting my own schedule. Now, that comes with trade-offs, right? So being able to make a living that supports your family and supports the lifestyle that you want, that's really a critical thing. There is more personal risk because you have more on the line. It's all you. You're not going to employment and getting a guaranteed paycheck per se. You got to really put everything into the business yourself. And as you grow, you're going to be maybe hiring more employees. They might be family members. They might be people in your community. And so commonly what you'll see for small businesses, this is the everyday entrepreneur. This is retailers. These are people in real estate, the trades, construction's a big one, services industry, again, consulting, as we mentioned for myself, and professionals. You'll see accounting professional CPAs, lawyers setting up their own shingle. So as every company starts small, some of them grow quite considerably over time, and they might stay privately held or they might go public. A large company here in definition from a revenue standpoint is typically over 100 million. And so that transition from small to big obviously can take a long time. For some, it's a rocket ship. So here what I wanted to talk about is not so much corporate America. I think you guys are familiar with corporate America, but how does that fit into, how does this conversation fit into an entrepreneurship discussion? Well, the key here is startups within large companies. And yes, they exist. They also come in the shape of innovation teams. So you might hear about the Corporate Startup Lab at the Schwartz Center. And as mentioned in my introduction, I'm one of the instructors along with Sean Amirati and Melissa Murphy. And it's something I personally have experience with. I was on a corporate startup team early in my post-MBA career at American Eagle Outfitters. It was an e-commerce division and subsidiary of American Eagle, which is a specialty apparel retailer headquartered here in Pittsburgh. And I was on the e-commerce team looking to launch and really grow AE.com. And it was an exciting time. The business is thriving today, an exciting part of their business. And it was truly a startup. And so there are corporate startups in a lot of companies that you may have heard of, but these are kind of quiet sometimes. Innovation teams might be similar, where they have executive sponsorship and the company overall is looking to maintain innovation in products and services. They want to ask questions of the market. They might have incremental change or transformation, or they might have complete transformative ideas. And so the range is really there. The budgets and the resources vary, as you might guess. And also another form of corporate innovation is corporate venture, where companies have corporate venture teams and they're looking to invest in startups outside of their business so that they can be part of that growth and creating enterprise value outside of their organization that they might eventually bring in through an acquisition or through partnering, so build, buy, or partnering. One of the more famous labs out there that you may have heard of is Amazon's Lab 126. This was the group that created the Kindle and so many other amazing products. And so this is kind of like Xerox PARC back in the day, if anyone knows about Xerox PARC inventing the mouse, the computer mouse. And so Amazon's done a really great job with this specific innovation team. And there are others out there that you may or may not heard of. Some of them locally, as mentioned in my introduction, one of them I'm affiliated with as an advisory board member for Safety.io. It's an Internet of Things data intelligence software for hardware in the gas detection space. So it's a safety, it's sold into safety organizations around the world. And Gustavo Lopez, I'm connected in with him because of the Corporate Startup Lab. And Mary Beth Green, she's the Chief Innovation Officer at Sheetz, which is a convenience company, privately held company here in the Western Pennsylvania area and Central Pennsylvania, you may have heard of. And she is standing up an innovation team, brand new, and her mission is to reimagine the future of Sheetz as a company and service and providing a convenience to customers. So it's very exciting. And Mary Beth is a Tepper graduate. So some of the motivations and incentives here for a corporate entrepreneur or an intrapreneur, they're typically motivated to fix things and change the world, solve problems, create new things, better things. The rewards are different in a company, as you can imagine. You know, it could be that you're not necessarily given equity in the new entity. Maybe you are, but not necessarily. And so the rewards are more around increased professional freedom, promotions, and really having an exciting element to your career. It's more, I wouldn't call it safe, but it's low to moderate risk compared to being a small business entrepreneur or a scalable startup entrepreneur, as we'll talk about in a moment. And again, the financial incentives vary than a typical startup. So scalable startups, certainly you've heard of many famous entrepreneurs who are in this category. And it's a pretty interesting category. I found these numbers that from 2019, about 2,700 companies in the US got first-time funding. And that was around $11 billion. So the number of companies is relatively low, I think, but the money and the capital is second highest on record. So an incredible amount of money invested last year. So what are some characteristics of scalable startups? Well, similar to some of the other entrepreneurs, they also are looking for solving a market problem and creating a solution that fit that market need. They typically get funding from venture capitalists, seed round, Series A, etc. And they then hire specialized employees. Typically, there's a lot of technology involved, technology focus, and so they need those team members to help them grow the business. And there's a high pressure, high pace, high return type of mentality. Some examples of companies that I have familiarity with. Calendly, I'm a huge fan, and I looked up, I didn't know this about the founder, Tope, but they only raised a Series A, and their value now is, I think, over $30 million, which is pretty impressive. And Don Charlton, who I did work with when it was the Resumator, it's now called Jazz HR, and he has also founded a company called Commute. So the scalable startup entrepreneur, again, highly motivated to achieve their vision. They do take on that personal risk, and they do have that motivation incentive because they have a high stake in the company as an equity holder, as a founder. Now here's a category you may not be familiar with, hopefully you are, called social entrepreneurship. So what is a social enterprise? A social enterprise is a business for good. Their mission is clear. They are motivated to solve social problems, to drive social change, and they combine a charitable consciousness with a business strategy. Some social entrepreneurs you may be familiar with or heard of. Tom's is an interesting one. They created the one-for-one model. So it's shoes and other retail products. And for every shoe you buy, they donate a pair. So Blake was the founder of Tom's and had that vision. Kiva, Jessica Jackley, she's one of the co-founders, and she has Pittsburgh roots. So I wanted to make sure to include her and give her a shout out. Kiva is doing crowdsource funding for startups, and for companies that have really harder time raising money. And so this is opening up so much opportunity for other social enterprises through crowdfunding. And John Miles, he's the CEO and co-founder of iWorker, and their mission is providing employment, remote employment, for virtual assistants around the world. And their focus initially was Venezuela, but they also are connected into Africa and other countries. So a social entrepreneur, again, making a difference is really important to them. It's at the heart of what they do and why they do it. And they care so deeply about that cause. And it's more than just earning a profit. It's really about solving that problem. The next category is innovative entrepreneurship. And you can say, well, Laurie, aren't all of these innovative? Yes, they are, but there is a slight difference in this. So here's some faces you may know, some younger faces for Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. And when you think of these two gentlemen, you probably think of them as inventors. And there's many more I could add to this page, of course, that you might be familiar with. But I thought that this was a cute photo. Anyway, they're very inspirational in the products that they created, and they built companies around them. And Sarah Blakely, for her product idea, became a movement. And so some of you out there may be familiar with her products that became a wonderful company that she bootstrapped and from her invention. So the innovative entrepreneur is a tinkerer. They're an inventor. They take these ideas, these concepts for products, and they turn them into business ventures. And they too want to change the way people live and create a better way to live. And they're very motivated, very passionate. But the key is kind of inventing the product. So a hustler entrepreneur. Does every entrepreneur hustle? Yes. But the characteristics of the hustler entrepreneur, I thought Gary Vaynerchuk is the ultimate hustler entrepreneur. If you're not familiar with Gary V, he has VaynerMedia. He's ubiquitous now in the marketing world. He's probably on every platform you can imagine and every social media, pretty much 24/7. And he is a hustler. He is someone who started small. He bootstrapped his business and had built it to an incredible level where it seemed like he exploded on the scene. Like, oh, of course now we know of Gary V, but little did we know how much time it took and how much hustle it took along the way, for us to really get to know him and his amazing work ethic. And he's willing to do what it takes. An imitator entrepreneur is not a negative. It sounds negative, like, oh, you're imitating, you're that's not original, let's look down on you. I don't mean that at all. Please don't take that. That's just what it's called. And really what it's saying, and for people that are out there, there's an existing industry or there's an existing business. And so we can do something different and better. And so here's a wonderful set of examples with Sam Walton. He did not invent retail, but his retail stores had a better approach to customer service. They had a better selection. They had better geography, whatever it was that really solidified their standing, enabled them to grow. Walmart is certainly a name to know. And then Barbara Corcoran, you recognize her from Shark Tank, and she got earned her stripes in this category from real estate. Again, she has a brokerage firm, very successful, the Corcoran Group, but she did not invent that industry. She just became very successful and did it and did things differently to grow. And then last but not least, Herman Cain. I know he died recently. I want to pay tribute to him. He created Godfather's Pizza, and certainly pizza was not a new business, but he was successful in bringing that business forward. So the imitator entrepreneur looks for business models and industries with potential. And they research them quite a bit to learn from what's worked, what hasn't worked, past mistakes, successes, and they try to find an area of differentiation, and they want to capitalize on the demand. I mean, that's what's nice about it, is you can really get more information and statistics about the market and about the customer base. And they too are highly determined to make this work. And last but not least, buyer entrepreneurs. I want to spend a little bit of time on buyer entrepreneurs. On my show, I talk to all kinds of entrepreneurs, family business entrepreneurs, people who have launched their own company, and I'll call them Generation 1 type of entrepreneur. And then there are people who help others in finding companies to buy. And so the buyer entrepreneur is looking to buy a company. Now, some of these faces may look familiar to you from the Schwartz Center. Chris Sincar is an adjunct professor, and his specialty is franchising. And what he does now is he works with people to help find the right match for them to get into a franchise business. So a franchise is something where you license the name, you license the products, and it's every contract's different, so I'm not going to kind of describe what those can be. But conceptually, you're launching your business, but you're launching it under the umbrella of something that's already in existence in your geography. Len Carrick, also an adjunct professor, and I think he was a guest speaker at Connects last week, and spoke about entrepreneurship through acquisition. And he has done this several times. And his current role, he was one of the investors of Uncle Charlie's Sausage, and he is the CEO of that company. That was a second generation company. All three of these gentlemen, by the way, have been guests on my podcast, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with them about their experience. And last but not least here, Jamie Van Buren, he is the managing partner of Generational Transfer Entrepreneurs, whom you might know from the Schwartz Center. They have a representative that is there working with MBA students. And the vision behind GT Entrepreneurs is to work with people who want to be operational CEOs, buy the business, and then run it. So it's a search fund model. So like I said, the buyer entrepreneur is buying into some proven businesses. It's not to say that there's not opportunity to improve. Of course, that's the goal, is to find value, unlock value by being hands-on and active in operations with a focus on expanding market share. And really, what's interesting about the buyer entrepreneur, I think from a risk perspective, is it's somewhere in the middle. The scalable entrepreneur, the small business entrepreneur, there's so much more risk there potentially. And again, this is it's a very individualistic scale of how to look at risk and return. But generally speaking, buyer entrepreneurs are looked at in more moderate risk. So the next part of this dialogue today is really for you, and for you to just give you some things to think about as you choose your path, your entrepreneurial path. And I ask this question for you in your own consideration, and hopefully we can have some dialogue here in the Q&A section. But what is motivating you to be an entrepreneur? We said earlier that it's not easy. Now there's about 20% of businesses that fail within the first 2 years, so it's not an easy thing. But if you want to be some of that 80% that makes it, what is motivating you to be an entrepreneur? And surveys have showed a pretty common answer to that is that people are motivated to be their own boss. And there's other answers too, what's motivating them, right? It might be financial freedom. It might be that freedom to work on a project you're really passionate about and set your own direction. But really think about what is motivating you. And also finding your fit. I believe there's always 3 things to a career choice. It's strengths, motivations, and fit. And I think fit's really important. And in the context of what we're talking about today, with the different types of entrepreneurship and the different types of entrepreneurs that are there, to find what's right for you. Who do you want to be? What type of person do you want to be? What do you want to be working on? What types of problems do you want to be solving? How do you want to feel about your work? You want to feel excited, you want to feel passionate, you want to feel rewarded. What you want to own, what does that mean to you? Maybe it means that you're willing to take on more risk because you don't want to own a home, not now. Or if you want to kind of get settled in your career, maybe be more involved in a corporate innovation team because financially it's a little more secure, and then down the road pursue some of these more entrepreneurial things, that might be your path. And then who you want to work with, who you want to be associated with, all the people around you to help you achieve your vision. So there's a lot to think about here, a lot of content I threw out at you, and I'm hoping that we can have an interesting conversation about this. If you go back to the Steve Blank article, and if you do find it out there and read it, you'll see that he included, it was 4 types of entrepreneurs and 4 types of entrepreneurship. And I think that's too narrow. So our conversation today certainly broadens that out. But one of the other things that you'll see in his article is it was kind of a judgment thing that I think motivated him to write that article. It was entrepreneurs looking down on other types of entrepreneurs, which I personally find very silly. But I think that there was a place and time, and it might still happen. I bring this up only because recently I heard of a story. A friend of mine in Los Angeles shared her story with me that this happened to her. In 2002, she was attending a very well-known business school in LA, which I won't mention, and she had recently started her own business. She was attending business school and she had her own business, and here she was in class with probably the majority of folks in her class interested in finance. And that was not her jam. She was passionate about yoga, and she was a yogapreneur. And her mission was to create a yoga business, not just in having clients, but to create something scalable. And in 2002, there really weren't people doing kids yoga, but that was what she was really interested in doing. And she created a whole movement around kids yoga. And she has trained yoga instructors all over the world and had a content platform and so on. And one of her professors literally called her out in the class, one of the classes, and said she wasn't an entrepreneur. Not only did she take extreme offense to that, and she did end up dropping out of business school, and not only because of that comment, but it was tied to that comment. And she's gone on to be a very successful entrepreneur in the yoga space. And here we are 20 years later, and she's still pursuing that passion. So I use that story to inspire you for, again, sticking to what you believe is the right fit for you. She did what she felt was right. She was passionate about it, and she's made a wonderful economic living for herself and for others, but also truly stuck to what she believed could be a thriving business and has been. So kind of in summary here for today, I think that's really what I want to leave you with, is considering your strengths, what's motivating you, and what fits you for the type of entrepreneur that you want to be, and then also being honest with yourself about the risk-reward profile. And the risk-reward profile is things that we talked about with, your investment and what's the return on an investment. Just like going to college, you make an assessment about, hey, I want to spend this money to go to college and I expect to get a return in the future based on my education. Well, it's no different certainly with this type of entrepreneurial objective, but you may have other factors in your life that might just make you think and go, oh, well, this is right for me now, or maybe this is right for me later. Give yourself time to think and that permission to struggle with some of your answers. I think that rushing through an exercise and then, half hour later, here I am, I'm done. Hey, you might be 100% crystal clear, and that's great. But if you do need that time to really think through your values, your personal mission, your vision, your strengths, and where you see this going. That's sort of the fundamentals, even if you're launching your own company, whether it's for your personal mission statement or your business mission statement, regardless, it takes some time. And I spent some time on that in the last 6 months, and I've learned and seen firsthand, you got to be really honest with yourself. And if it doesn't feel right to you, then it probably isn't, and you just got to keep working on it. And I think also, again, for me too, being a solopreneur now, finding really good partners and advisors along the way is really important. And as we talked about in my introduction, I love working with entrepreneurs to help them create their vision and then bring that vision to life. I work with more well-established companies, let's say, but I'm certainly open to conversations if any of you want to have some time and just talk about some of your thoughts. And I welcome your questions. So I hope you enjoyed today and some food for thought as you think about your entrepreneurial journey and where you see yourself going in the future. So Allison, I think we can open it up for questions and comments.
Okay, great. If anybody has any questions, if you want to post them in chat, we can go ahead and do that. Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, does anybody want to pitch their idea or anything like that now if you don't have any questions? Oh, somebody's writing down a question, she said, so we'll just wait. Davika, if it's easier, you could go on. Oh, here comes the questions. I believe a person can be more than one type of entrepreneur. What are some types that intersect well? Would be a great to ponder over.
And do we know who the question was from?
That is from Davika.
Davika. Okay. Davika, thank you for being brave and asking the first question. I'm going to go back to my cheat sheet for the, they're all on the same page and we can look at them to the beginning here. Yeah, there definitely can be an overlap. These are not mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive definitions. And I do see a number of possibilities of overlap. Certainly, innovative can be with a scalable startup, and innovative can be with a small business, and innovative can be with a large company. For example, with the large company and the corporate startup teams, we talked about Amazon Lab 126. Bosch is another great example, and they were one of our participating companies in the corporate startup lab class this past spring. And Bosch has a number of technologies that they are looking to bring to market. And in our corporate startup lab class, that was one of the projects the students worked on, developing a go-to-market plan for one of their technologies. So the innovation came through the invention, and then obviously bringing it with the corporate startup. You also probably see that, the imitator, like we talked about, pizza and real estate and retail, they're using existing markets to improve upon those things. And so you probably got to be a hustler. I was thinking about including Ray Kroc. If some of you know who he is, he created McDonald's Corporation. And if you watch the movie about his life, he was an imitator. There was something that a burger joint that inspired him in California. And then he used process improvement and product flow through the burger production process, if you want to call it that, to move more burgers and shakes and fries than anyone had thought possible. And that became the genesis for scaling McDonald's. And so in a lot of ways, he was a hustler, he was a salesman, and he did everything he could to get the equipment he needed and so on. And so he overlaps in a couple of those categories. I think for scalable startup and small business, as I mentioned when we first started the conversation, a small business and a scalable startup are kind of the same thing at one point in time. I think where they tend to diverge is for scalable startups in seeking venture funding, whereas small businesses tend to either be bootstrapped or getting bank loans and things of that nature. So I hope that answers your question. I guess I would turn it back to you though, Davika, if you're willing to share. Were there any in particular that you were wondering if I was going to mention?
Those are some interesting insights. I was wondering if there are any that clash, or there are just styles that contrast each other, or are all 8 something that an entrepreneur can possess or be representative of?
Well, that's a good question. I think if it's an entrepreneur who's starting on their own, then social might be one to kind of think about for a second, because a social enterprise is typically going to categorize themselves a little differently to stand out. Now, that's not to say they have to get a business designation as a B Corp. If you've heard of B corporations, There's a certification along with that, but that is a difference where there can be a social enterprise that's designated as a B corporation. They're not a nonprofit. They are for-profit, but I believe in their governance and their structure, there might be something that requires them to maybe give back in certain ways. And that could be a distinction where that sets them apart. Whereas some of the other characteristics, you can be someone who's super motivated, like a hustler, or super inventive, like the innovative, the inventors. And the inventors can live within Amazon, they do, right? Or they live within Tesla, certainly. So if you're starting your own business, I think one lens of it is back to, what is motivating you? What type of problems are you looking to solve? And if they're more social good, then that's probably going to point you to the social enterprise. Does that mean that a small business or a large company can't have social interests and for the environment or for people? It doesn't mean that at all. They might have that. It might be part of their values. It might be part of their mission, but not so much tied into the business, the type of business enterprise and the governance, and then the incorporation like a social enterprise might have.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks, Laurie.
You're welcome.
Do we have any other questions?
Well, just also her other part of that question was, are there any potential conflicts? And I don't know that there would be. I think it's more about alignment. Any potential conflicts between any of these approaches probably comes down more to either the creation, the business formation type, the governance of that entity, and then the equity ownership of that entity. And so the upfront planning, just like with any business, is going to be important if you're starting something from scratch. And then who your co-founders are, if you have a co-founder, and making sure that you're really aligned on the overall vision and spending that time up front to articulate not only who you are, but who they are and what brings you together. And if it's the vision for the company that brings you together and you're joined for that purpose, that's really, really fundamental. And if you're a single founder, you still would do the work to figure out those elements, but then you're not necessarily looking for that alignment of a co-founder. You're looking for that alignment on people that you hire as advisors or partners or employees to come onto your team. That was a good question about conflict. That I'm not specifically, sure what you were thinking there.
Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
Well, Allison, if there's no other questions, everyone has my email. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn with a direct message. Happy to answer any other questions that you might have if you think of them after today.
Perfect. Thank you, Laurie.